Hey guys, Thomas the Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review Murder on the Orient Express. So, for this little review, just a little preface, I've learned in other reviews, or just another review, that apparently this is based off of a book and another movie that has come out some time before, so this is yet among a long list of reboots, which is no longer surprising, so whatever. Anyways, I have not seen the original or read the book, so getting into this was a bit interesting, and I have also not seen any trailers whatsoever for this movie. I only heard about it because I saw the one review of it pop up, and so I decided before checking it out I should definitely check out the actual movie itself, and so I did. So that's my little preface. With that being out of the way, this will be a spoiler review, so if you have not seen the movie and don't want to be spoiled, well, I will be spoiling it, so there you go. So this movie follows a detective named Hercule, or as I liked to call him in my little notes, Mr. Mustache, even though he wasn't the only character with the mustache. His mustache was excellent, so I called him Mr. Mustache, Grey Mustache. He's the guy on the far left on the poster here. So Hercule is this great detective guy, and he's, at the beginning of the movie, setting up this whole grand display about this whole murder thing he solved with these three religious folks, and he points out all these clues and so on and so forth, and then he finally blames one of the police guards who happens to be there. He ends up being the guy responsible. They give chase a little bit, and the Hercule character set up his little cane just in the right place at the right time so that the murderer would get caught. So he meets up with some guy who happens to know his reputation. He's like, hey, why don't you, I don't like you, but that's the reason you probably like me. And then they chat for a bit. He meets with this, other woman, and these two are together, I suppose. So Hercule's like, okay, I'll follow you, whatever. And eventually they end up on this train, the Orient Express, where we get to meet the rest of the crew of the, or not crew, but the rest of the people getting on board, which happen to be all these fancy people, or the majority seem to be fancy. There's this sort of inclination that these people are not in any way, shape, or form connected. Or that's what the dialogue in the beginning implies. So, as this movie moves on, we meet this guy named Ratchet, who apparently is talking with our main detective here about getting hired to be a bodyguard, essentially, because he is a big target, according to some of the stuff he has done. So Ratchet gets left alone, and when the lights grow dim, he is in fact the one who ends up being murdered. So, with that being said, and with the train being stopped by a snow avalanche, or whatever it was, I believe it was like a snow in, and the train gets derailed, he figures with the time he has, he's might as well figure out what's going on, who murdered this guy, and he starts questioning each and every individual throughout the movie. So from there, we get the grand list of questionings. He begins with one of the guy's co-workers. He starts to discover that there are two, I believe there were two instances of characters, both were female, who were related to someone who Ratchet had himself killed. So they immediately started to become suspects, and the guy who worked for him also is suspect. And the suspect list seemed to grow more and more as each individual seemed to have some sort of connection or tie in with this murderer. And the movie tries to pull like these sort of like red herrings along the way, which is a nice touch for this movie to have like, oh, but it's definitely going to be this person, or it's definitely going to be that person now at this point in juncture, based off of the evidence we are seeing throughout the film. For example, there is a point in time where they are outside the train, or at least he is, and he sees someone running, and he ends up seeing that it was the coworker. So the coworker becomes the main suspect for a good chunk, or that like sort of middle portion of the movie. When we get these little hints and clues about like how drugs were used via other, stuff. We learned that Ratchet wasn't his real name, that his real name was Cassetti, and that he changed his name in order to go about his business, I suppose. He's talking to certain individuals, like this red-haired lady, who seems to be quite knowledgeable herself, seems to know like what's going on, what's what. He's talking with this old lady who happens to have these little dogs with her. Talking with the French nurse that works for her. And it does an interesting thing where most of the events that take place in the past are flashbacks in black and white, so it's pretty easy to tell when events are happening in the past, so I do appreciate that. We see that the blonde woman ends up, this blonde woman who he was talking to, like she was saying throughout the movie, like, oh, I'm crazy, no one could believe me. We see her end up getting stabbed, but we don't know like how that ended up happening. Probably the biggest red herring in the movie, that the stabbing, because like there was this whole suspect thing where like it was leading right back to the co-worker, but then the whole stabbing thing happened right after that, so it made it seem like, oh, he couldn't possibly be the murderer if like this woman is being stabbed way over here now. This movie does have pretty decent fake outs, red herrings, all things considered. And that is what a good murder movie mystery thing would do, is create these red herrings, these sort of like, oh, it could be this thing, it could be that thing. And then we have like this moment where the black guy is like, it was me all along. And there is stuff like that going on. So he tells the people like who are working on the train to like eventually like whatever, to like move away, as he sort of put all the pieces together eventually, as we're nearing the end of the movie. So he has them all outside at this point in time, and they're sitting like in this long table that they have set up, and everyone's there, all the suspects, and he starts going through each and every one of them, saying how all of them were connected in one way or another to this one guy, this one murderer in the past, and saying how it could have really have been any one of them. So he eventually comes to the ultimate conclusion that, big spoiler alert, it was everyone. Now, to be honest, that isn't the most creative, like, oh no, like, reveal of all. I mean, it kind of, like, downplays all the red herrings to an extent but it kind of, it's both, really. It downplays it, and it kind of is an intriguing way of, like, saying how it was all of them at the same time, which is an odd thing to say for a movie. It downplays it in the sense that you kind of always want it to be this one person, and you kind of want to condense it to be that way. I think that's how the human mind works in a weird way. I don't know if that's like a thing that you could prove, but like my scenario, like that's where I was leaning towards. Now I wasn't trying to pinpoint like who it was throughout the movie. I was just trying to say it should at least be one person instead of it being all the people who are, you know, loosely connected by this one thread character. Um, this actress who put on the entire thing, got them all together, and did this massive stabbing on this guy who killed the daughter, who's really young. So, you know, in that way, it kind of goes in this weird sort of way where, you know, the guy at the beginning, our young, or our sort of mid-aged hero, Hercule, saw things in black and white, and that's how he was able to sort of dictate who was responsible, and it was always like cold hard facts, get to it, it's this guy, you know, put him away. But in this instance where there was so much nastiness, as he put it, or, you know, he puts it in another way, but I'm sort of paraphrasing here, the sort of nastiness, um, and how all of them had hurt put upon them, and that's what led them to this. He says he will tell them, the police, the truth. So he wants them to kill him in order for them to live a happy, normal life because they were all hurt. So, you know, his character does go through a pretty interesting arc, and it kind of paints the whole picture of, you know, kind of the whole point of the movie is like, when is murder not just black and white, which is a really bizarre subject, all things considered. You know, when does it become supposedly justified through these characters' eyes? And I felt like they did it okay, or I should say better, with some of the female characters, like the ones that were related to the daughter. But the rest of the people they sort of brought in, they kind of felt way more loose and just sort of not as well connected. I feel like they could have eliminated some of the people that, you know, again, sort of honing it down into this like one or two people possibly. I think that would have made a more interesting story because it is more connected to those two characters, or one character, the actress, as he points out. You know, the one that was supposedly the most hurt by all of this. So, you know, having it just be her, I think that would have justified a lot of what this movie suffers through. And again, just having it be everyone, it sort of lessens the experience. Like, again, I think I would have taken like two of them coercing together, and that'd be it. Like, leave the rest of the people out of it. But at the end, where it sort of correlates with how everyone sort of interacted with it, that in itself was clever, but I don't feel like their reasoning was just as justified, again, as the rest of the two individuals that were most affected. So the reveal is kind of less satisfactory. How they pull it off is a bit more interesting, though I think they could have found a way to make it two people doing everything. I think they could have pulled that off and have it still be as interesting. I think, again, and I suppose that would diverge from the book, because apparently the book has the very same ending, but I think that would actually help this movie, since it is a reboot. Have it have something different that sets it apart from the book. Have it deviate from the book. And I think that would have helped elevate the ending and have the clues that sort of, you know, come about, have those little pieces come together in such a more cohesive way that fit so tightly together, and I think that would have satisfied at least me a lot more. So as this movie stands, I think I'm only going to give it a 6 out of 10. I'm very close to giving it like a 5 out of 10. I think the acting is solid, But I think, sadly, so much of this movie hinges on that reveal and how everything is sort of put together. Like, that is the glue of this movie, and the glue is, like, it's sort of like coming apart, if that makes any sense. It doesn't stick fully. And I think that's what hurts the movie the most, is that there's so much good stuff happening, but when the reveal actually happens, a lot of that good stuff sort of falls off, if that makes any sense. So it kind of hurt itself in that aspect. But I would, if you didn't mind this whole spoiler thing, and if you clicked out of this video like you should have, if you haven't seen the movie, then I would say, and I should have said at the beginning, you should probably just check it out if you're interested in a murder mystery movie. And that's my review of Murder on the Orient Express. If you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And also make sure to check out that link in the description. It'll head you over to my Patreon. Please feel free to donate. Or on the PayPal on the main page of my channel. That is an also way to potentially donate. And until next time, everyone, bye!